Chief Niemeyer, how are you?
Good, great. How you doing?
I'm doing swimmingly, sir. Fire has been a big thing on this show recently. Obviously, we had the like apocalyptic style fire season from last year,
Yeah,
which I mean, I had smoker scoff for weeks. It
right,
was wild. I mean,
right.
no, it was just weeks, months. I also have a couple friends. One was running, working as a contractor paramedic in like a trailer, helping out with everybody, and then another was actually running a fire crew and contracting
hmm
with fire trucks. And it
Yeah,
just both of them said, like, it has never been like this. Like,
yeah,
this is beyond. Like well beyond historically any problems we've had with fire. And then not to help that, I had Dean Cameron from the
right.
Office of Insurance in,
Yep.
and he was like, "Yeah, this is not stopping."
Yeah,
And the Office of Insurance is working really hard to work with insurance carriers to still make Idaho an attractive, profitable place for insurance companies. So they voluntarily engage in commerce here, and Idahoans cannot have their insurance canceled. But
hmm
this is a thing. Like
It's a
this
big
is a
thing.
thing nationwide. We see a lot of different states suffering with these things. Idaho has been working really hard to head this off. The governor obviously proposed a $60 million
Yep,
essentially refresh to our bucket of money that we spent, and then advocated for a $40 million recurring
right.
line item to kind of get ahead of this. Help me understand where this fits in with your department.
Yeah, so I'll take it to Boise first. We have what we call the Urban Interface area, and all that is where homes and people are meeting that interface that burns, right? And so in our foothills, if you look, we don't have a forest, obviously, in the foothills, but we have a lot of grass. And that's what starts to burn, about 10,000 acres that burned. We had wind actually initially going into the city. And so that gives us a lot of cause for concern because when you look at these conflagration fires, what we call them, when you have multiple houses that burn, let's take LA, right?
Okay.
Palisades, Eaton,
Sure,
whatever.
sure, sure.
What happens is a house catches on fire, you have winds blowing, they're heavy, strong winds, and then those embers just start carrying and they just start igniting. That's the challenge. So when we see the wildfire issues, not just in Idaho, but across the West, and you see these big fires, Palisades, Eaton. Before that, it was Paradise, California. Remember, it was
I remember
Lahaina,
that. I
right? It was
remember
all
that.
these fires that
Yeah,
have
yeah.
made the news. So when I hear it's a new problem, it's not a new problem. We've actually been dealing with this for quite a while. It's just getting bigger and more. And so what we had with the Valley Fire is that we had the wind blowing in towards the city, which caused us great concern initially. Thankfully, we had a shift. The other benefit we had that day, and it was that day in particular, because of the fires that were going on in Idaho, we had a huge aviation asset in the state of Idaho. So you probably saw all the planes that were flying the Valley Fire and
Oh yeah.
dropping and all
Oh
that.
yeah.
We don't have that every year. And we don't have that every day. So some of those bigger planes that we had fighting the Valley Fire, we just got lucky that they were in town. And so we were able to suppress that fire a lot sooner. Otherwise, we would have had a much larger fire. So the threat here in Idaho is real. You mentioned the governor's work. I applaud the governor for what he's doing. I was part of a task force, a little subsection of that task force that looked at better response across Idaho. We made our recommendations. He took all of that together. You mentioned Dean Cameron. He was very involved in this. And we said, what are the top 10 things we need to do to affect change for the better? Because it is coming. I was fortunate or not fortunate enough. About a week, 2 weeks after Paradise, California burn, I was called up. I do some work for the Western Fire Chiefs Association. I was called up and said, "Do you want to go on a tour through Paradise?" Moderated by the fire chief that was there that day, and really look at the damage and destruction. So it was the fire service, it was insurance, it was the standards folks, the code folks, and we went through Paradise, and it's shocking when you see it. You know, you can watch it on TV and say, "Wow, that's too bad." When you go through it and you see that devastation, it is horrific. It really is to see that amount of destruction in any community. But as I got done with Paradise, one of the first phone calls I made was to the McCall fire chief. And I said, if there's any community in Idaho that resembles Paradise and the struggles, it's you. If you think about McCall, if there's a large fire in McCall, how are folks going to get in and out? They're either 55 or 95 towards New Meadows, right? That's essentially it, unless you want to just run to the hills, right? You're going to go up
Yeah,
past
that's
the lake
not
and all
that's
that.
not a good strategy.
That's not good.
I had Brad Ritchie from the
Yep.
emergency management, and he was talking about this exact thing. He's like,
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how we can get appropriate evacuation plans and mechanisms for people, especially in tourist areas where you have people that are not familiar with the localized,
Right.
localized plans. And it's like, how do we communicate to those people who might just be there on the wrong day? And
Yeah,
they're
they
like,
don't
what
know.
do we do?
Yeah, they don't know. And I think so. Brad and I co-chaired that
There you
subject that
go.
I was telling
Yeah.
you about. And one of the things we talked about with evacuation is number one, the terminology has to be really clean and easy for everybody in Idaho. And what we found through the fires last summer is we were talking about evacuations in different areas of the state, and different folks were using different terminology. So some might have heard ready, set, go, which is a very common national type communication on evacuations, but others were hearing level 1, 2, and 3. Well, which one's right?
Did anybody do like orange, blue, red?
No, no. We learned that lesson. That some
All right.
communities did stoplights. Like, we're not going to do stoplights. But I think that's one of the governor's recommendations. We need to standardize that across Idaho in how we communicate to people. So if I'm living in Boise or Star or anywhere else, but I'm visiting Sun Valley or Coeur d'Alene, or take your pick, and a fire breaks out and I hear those evacuation signals, it's the same all the way around the state. So we're not confusing people. That's the worst thing we can do in public safety, is confuse people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And bottom line is another thing that that Brad brought up was that he's like, listen, people criticize a lot of people criticize the response you see with like big national fires, right? Be it like Maui or in California or Florida, wherever it might be. And one of the big issues is like, hey, where's FEMA? FEMA should be addressing this. And Brad made it really clear. It's like, that's a misnomer. Like FEMA is not there for localized response. Like it stays with you, man. Like what happens in Boise stays in Boise. And it can be federally supported, but the response needs to come directly from the state and directly from the local agencies. And so if we're not looking to solve this problem, if we're not addressing evacuation plans and addressing better interdepartmental communication and collaboration, especially with the larger fires, be it with the aviation sector or with different fire departments and whatnot and resources on the ground, we're not gonna get there. Like nobody's coming to save us. Yeah,
and Brad's right. FEMA has historically been, depending on your point of view, they've been really good at hurricane response, tornado response. That's been their bailiwick. Wildfire has never been their bailiwick. It's never been on their radar. So in the West, in particular, you'll hear people say fires happen everywhere, wildfires happen everywhere. They do. But in the West, we burn differently. It just is a fact of life. So in the West, we have a pretty robust system through NIFC right here in our backyard, through an ordering resource process. Every fire department has an agreement with, for example, IDL. I know you had Dustin Miller on.
Yes.
And so we have an agreement with IDL. So when we need to deploy for them at their request, we have a system in place to do it. FEMA's just never been good at it. And quite honestly, I don't think they ever will be, if I'm being honest. So when Brad says we need to rely on ourselves, that is correct. And I think people have asked me about, can we really stop a wildfire like that here in Idaho or anywhere else? And the answer is yes, but it's not going to be just through suppression efforts. We can't put enough firefighters on the ground. If you look at the film from LA, from Palisades or Eaton, when those fires are burning that hot, nobody's going in, right? We're sitting back in a safe zone and we're waiting for the fire to burn through, and then we go in and see what we can do. The only way we're going to affect better outcomes is through better mitigation practices. And that's building codes. It's what kind of vegetation do you have around your home. We're doing a really cool project in Boise using AI. And I'm probably the last one to jump on the AI bandwagon. To be honest, I was always a little skeptical of it. But this particular tool takes a picture of your home as it is today. So it identifies through AI what vegetation you have around your house. Are your vents exposed or not? And then just provide you a list of things to do to improve your home when it comes to resiliency. I think that's a good thing. That's where AI can actually be a good thing, not a bad thing.
But it's a lot, if I may, especially taking into consideration little things around your home, like vegetation close. Yeah, that's fine. Like I think people largely understand that, and different building materials, fine. But it's like the tiny little maintenance things, like clearing out the gutters and making sure your eaves have screens on them so they can't absorb embers. It's like those types of things. Like in the absence of needles in the downspouts and drainage, everything. It was like that's the stuff that's like this oily little just tinderbox that goes for it.
It is. And the challenge in that is that we can promote all the mitigation efforts that we know are right. We've tested these scientifically. We've got demos of houses that, not Boise Fire, but nationally. And so you can show that to the public, but it also does take a culture change. And that's the hard part. We're talking about human beings. It's their piece of land. They want to use it and build it the way they want to. And that's where this insurance challenge comes in that Dean probably mentioned. It used to be a California issue, then an Oregon issue. Now it's an Idaho issue as well. And that's the reinsurance problem,
right? Where
folks have relied on insurance forever. They live in the woods. Now they're not being reinsured. And that's a challenge because there's nobody willing to accept that risk in the insurance industry. So in the Western, we've been doing a lot of work between the insurance companies and the mitigation work to show the insurance companies if we can mitigate a subdivision, for example, like we did in Boise. We had a very good urban interface plan for the Valley Fire, if that would have taken off. We have a building code in the urban interface that helps protect those homes. If we can show insurance that we're doing our part by mitigating this humongous subdivision or area, you insurance need to do your part and recognize that. And that's the challenge.
Right. And especially with the insurance, I mean, this is one of the things that I appreciate about Idaho in general, and the pragmatic nature of the, state government. Not everybody's perfect, but especially with insurance, when you look at what other states, the struggles other states have gone through, and it always ends up with the consumer, the individual citizen getting screwed over. But there was this huge struggle in California years back where insurance companies were articulating, they're like, listen, this is beyond our capacity to make money. Like we are, and again, they have to stay in the black. They have to stay solvent. You're not going to nationalize them. So they're like, listen, if I don't make money at the end of the day, like even if it's a dime, if I can't stay in the black, it's over for everyone. Right. And there's nothing worse than thinking you have insurance and then realizing your insurance company is insolvent and you have nothing there. So they're like, if we're going to act responsibly, we have to say we can't insure this anymore. And of course, I think the legislature in California is not always the most receptive to things like you can't have your cake and eat it too. And they passed a law that said no, you have to insure people. So the legal system got into this wrangle with these private entities saying like you have to do this. Is like, what are you doing? And of course, the insurance companies respond with, okay, yeah, we'll insure people. We just won't take on any new people. And so it's like over a period of time, our risk will be mitigated again. Right. And it's like, that's not what you want. You want insurance companies to voluntarily engage in commerce in your state, and whatever can be done to entice them or help them feel more comfortable. That's when Idahoans win.
Yes. And if you look at California, it wasn't just the state telling insurance companies you have to play. They also created the FAIR Plan, which was a state plan for insurance. Well, that's gone bankrupt or going bankrupt. So if you think about
there's a piece of government insurance that's going bankrupt.
Shocker, I know.
It's going bankrupt. It's not solvent.
Right.
That's wild times.
And so the answer has to be different, because if you look at the Palisades fire, which then shifted south, I flew into LAX and just kind of looked out, and my wife said, "What's all the black dots on the ground?" I said, "That's everything that burned from here to the ocean." That was about $20 billion, and that was before they had calculated all the loss, right? That was just that area. So to your point about insurance companies not being able to afford it, I have this conversation all the time, even with my wife, when she said, for years, insurance has been taking our money. I'm sure they're still making money. I said, honey, when one fire and it results in $20 billion worth of claims, there's a business model there that doesn't equate at some point. And so how do we change that narrative? Mitigation. It's the only way we're going to stop this. We can't put enough firefighters on the ground or in the air to stop some of these fires. But if homeowners, just with a little bit of work, change kind of how they do things in those urban interface areas, we can affect change.
This is one of those things, though, when you I am guilty of this myself as a younger man. When I would get some notice, they're like, make sure there's no shrubs within 4 feet of your house. I was like, my wife has been working to keep that bush growing. That's right. Like some Mexican seagrass bush. And it's like, it is 6 inches from my house, man. I'm like, I'm not transplanting. Yeah. Like I'm not like, she's been killing herself for 5 years to make this front garden, and you get this real stickler mentality where like, come on, man, this, but in reality, I have a friend. All right. He had this commercial property, and he was redoing it, and they required fire retardant tiling on the ceiling of the place. Yeah. And he was like, can't we just do like this normal stuff? They're like, no. And he was, having this discussion with his fire inspector. And he's like, this is going to make a difference. And he's just like getting real mad about it. Yeah. Like, first off, what do you know? Like you've never engaged in any kind of like fire planning or like fire material, education. And it is those little things. Yep. And again, when I was educated, and they're like, listen, it's really the gutters. Like you can do a lot of stuff around your house, but if you have stuff in your gutters and your roof light's on fire, it's all over. Yeah. And just, it's that dumb thing. And so even things you're like, listen, if there's a big fire, the 4-foot shrub isn't going to make a difference. It's like, yeah, but maybe there won't be a big fire if everybody keeps, their gutters cleaned out and everything. And like, look, I'm not a firefighter, right? I'm not involved in the industry. I'm not in the insurance industry. I don't stand to make money off of any of this, but I do not want this place to go by the way that other places went, where you have 20 billion in loss. You have communities completely displaced. And then you have everybody pointing fingers, and essentially the result of a failed local and state government is like, that's a terrible thing to do. Like, can we just be pragmatic and take your word for it, essentially?
And that's, I think, where we're at. And I applaud the governor and the work he's doing. And in some states, Oregon is an example, because of this wildfire risk, the reinsurance issue, all of it, they thought the best thing would be to mandate to the people what you have to do. And we know in a society of free thinkers, and I go back to Idaho, we love and pride ourselves on being resilient and independent. Sometimes that gets us in trouble, but we love it. And that's who we are. So I don't think our approach is to mandate things, unless through a city code they want to do an urban interface code, and the people support it. But for the majority, we have to educate. And it's our job to make sure people understand in a good way that they can understand, here's your risk and here's your danger. And you can choose to or not to. That is your right as an individual. But when the insurance company comes around and says, we're not going to insure you because of too much risk, you've done nothing, you can't point back to us. We've given you the information to make a good decision. And I think, you mentioned the shrub, and the shrub alone is not an issue, not the problem. It might catch fire, right? But then it's the bark underneath the shrub. And then it's the things, right, that we're trying to educate on to say, here's your risk and here's a way to mitigate it so that you don't lose your house. I mean, for most of us, the house is the biggest asset we have. And to lose that, even though it gets rebuilt, costs a lot of money to do.
Well, you also have, like, you're not rebuilding the baby pictures on the inside. No. There was a mask mandate bill that got passed recently. And I was talking to a bunch of people. They're like, how are people doing? Like, why aren't people participating with the idea of a mask mandate? Yeah. And I was essentially having the same conversations, like, because people want the ability to be educated on risk and then take the risk if they want to. Yeah. And I really appreciate that concept of, hey, we're going to tell you what the risk is, but like, this is on you, man. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't blame us once we've warned you, once we've articulated the problem, once your insurance company warned you, like all of these. I had an insurance company get a hold of me recently, and they're like, I need pictures of your house. I want pictures all the way around your house. I want pictures of your roof. And, by the way, your insurance is canceled effective today, and send us pictures and maybe we'll reinstate you. It's like, son of a gun, man.
Yeah, that's
like,
going on.
Yeah, they're really, really aggressive. But again, for better or for worse, it's almost like the alternative isn't stomach. Like, I can't tolerate it. Right. Like, even me, I'm like, stop saying mandate. Like, don't tell, like, I can jump out of a plane. I can buy hard alcohol. I can, do whatever. Yeah. Like, I should be able to take a risk. And I understand that there's a line to be drawn at some point where you're like, yeah, but you taking a risk with your home also puts us at risk. Yep. That puts your neighborhood at risk. And I'm not unsympathetic to that. And I don't have the answer, but I am very sympathetic to people saying, I do not like mandates. I will voluntarily engage in a lot of work to fix things, but do not mandate me either way.
That's the really hard part in mandates. I mean, obviously as a fire chief, we have the fire code, and so there's certain things we do. But, you think about mandates, and I'm kind of with you as far as I don't like them as a practice. I don't think it's a great way to do business and culturalize what you're trying to do. But at the same time, if what you're going to do is going to affect me now and my family, that's where it gets hard. When you talk about mandates, I still believe educating people the right way, meeting them where they're at, and sometimes we don't do that very well. Meeting people where they're at to explain it to them in a way that they can get it and understand it, and then apply it to their situation. I think that's the path we're going with wildfire.
Charlie Lyons from the Rangeland Protection and Fire Associations, he had this beautiful point at the end. He's like, we're not coming to save you and just like have you run away.
Right.
Like, you got to turn around and spit in the eye of the devil.
Yeah.
He said it several times. Like, God damn, that's hard. Like, that is a hard man right there. Yeah. And just to call for participation, 100% all in participation. Like, this is not a state that says, hey, we got it, take off. It's like, no, man, pick up a bucket.
Yeah.
Like, here we go. So in the spirit of that, aside from, like, I'll clear my gutters, like, I'll make sure the vegetation, but is there really anything that Idahoans can do to support this? And again, one of the big things that I've been educated on recently is that because of the way our tax system is, like, for instance, we talk about Chief Tominski over in Starfire. he was telling me about an individual that came up to him that was a retired firefighter and was like, listen, I can never vote for like, taxes for fires. Right. And he's like, okay, just help me understand why. Yeah. And he's like, well, because, where he was living in a different state and like, the city would always get people to pay more money for taxing, right? But it went into the general fund of the city, and then the city turned around and took all the money out and like used it for whatever, and we got hosed. But they were doing it in our name, so I will never do it. And Chief Tominski's like, okay, that sucks. Like, I get that. You realize we're not connected to the city, right? And he was like, what do you mean? He was like, we're our own thing. So literally all of the money that gets connected to us comes to us. Yeah. And we, again, talking about freedom, not mandating, that people have a decision to make. And do they want the decision to be that we're going to have longer response times and perhaps really difficult areas that aren't going to be covered appropriately, or not? I also spoke with Chief Stowell from the Canyon County paramedics, and they're fighting the same thing, which is like, listen, we do not have the money. Like, you're going to be dealing with, like, instead of 6, 7, 8 minute response times, you're going to be dealing with 10, 11, 12. And the people of Idaho have a right to decide if that's what they want. Yeah. But his articulation is like, listen, that's a lifetime if you're having a stroke. Right. Like, that is a lifetime if you're having a heart attack. A 3-minute differentiation with oxygen to your brain or not could be it. Yeah. And again, we have this freedom, for better or for worse. Yes. But, I think if people understood, I don't think I know the right answer. In fact, I know I don't know the right answer, but I do think that if more people understood the struggle of funding these, the fire district and the response districts, I know that we'd have a more representative outcome no matter what.
And let me go back to something you said, because this is really where it has to start, and that's the community.
Right.
Whether you're a city, so I'm a city fire chief for the city of Boise. I worked in the city of Meridian before that. Chief Tominski is a fire district. Regardless of your form of government and you provide the service, the community has to articulate what is that they expect.
Right. What do you want?
And the challenge in that, I've done these exercises a few times over my 30 years. They'll tell you they want right now service, right? So if I'm having a heart attack, my house is on fire, I want you guys there as fast as you possibly can get there. And I articulate to them, to do that, here's what we need, and here's how many stations we need to have to cover this geographical area to get you that service. But then you articulate the cost, and that's where the gap is. So I think it is a community discussion. We try and sometimes make this a statewide issue, which there are challenges with funding and all that. We know that. But it has to start with the community, and what level of service do you expect? And from there, we show you how to provide that. And then you vote yes or no. But the challenge that we have as fire chiefs, it's hard to not be able to provide that level of service that we think our community expects. And we say we think because we're out there talking to them. But when we can't do that, like you talked about Chief Tominski, Michael Stoll in Canyon County, they're having, you talked about their levy request. So when you're now delayed 11, 12 minutes, that is your life. After about 5, 6 minutes without oxygen, our odds go down of trying to save a life. So it is a big, broad discussion. I think it's how do we communicate it to people? And it's certainly platforms like this that helps educate people and get that out there on what the facts are. Anytime I watch that STAR levy go through, and I kind of followed the social media, which I usually don't like to do. It just gets my blood pressure up. Yeah. But, you just see the misinformation being shared. And so how do you overcome that? And I know Greg's doing a lot of work in STAR, a lot of public meetings going on now. I think he's gone about every night to some homeowners association meeting, but that's the way you have to do it.
Man, but the ROI on crappy social media campaigns is just so high. It costs you nothing. You can do it 24 hours a day from your phone. Just keep sending out missiles and just like, I think it's wild. It's like, this is just, I don't know how this is going to end for like the United States in general. I don't know. Just from a state standpoint, right? Like, I've been doing a dump truck of interviews with all kinds of different people. I was talking to somebody the other day, and it was like, from a civilian standpoint, I don't know that there's anybody else in the state of Idaho that's not directly professionally involved in politics that knows more about the issues in Idaho than I do. Right. Like, if you listen to every single one of my episodes, you'll get closer, but I also have the benefit of talking to people on and off air. Yep. So like, I have double what everyone else. And it's this really interesting struggle of like, wow, this is really self-determination. Like, the individuals of Idaho are determining where their fate lies with these things. Yeah. And there are people that I don't know why come on. And again, I know a fair amount of things, and they'll say, you will see these social media campaigns. It's like, that's just flat out not even there's close. No shrapnel of truth to that. And I always wonder, like, what's happening? Like,
Yeah.
why?
But
like,
you don't need
what
shit
is
for
it?
social media, right?
No,
I mean,
I
it's
know.
it's just you and whatever you want to say.
I just don't get it. It's like, how is this? Like, are you a Russian bot? Like, who are you?
But I think the funny thing, though, as I think about it, Matt, is, and it's easy for us old folks to start capping on Gen whatever.
Yeah,
right?
Gen
Y,
sure.
Gen Z,
Sure,
and all this stuff. But I've got some kids that are in those generations, both millennials and Gen Z. And it's interesting to kind of watch what's happening. Even some of the firefighters I have that are in that younger generation, I think they're figuring out, we can't trust it. I know they're the TikTok generation, all that, but social media is a news source. I think they're figuring it out. Like this is not reliable. This is a bunch of garbage. And I don't know. Your question was, how does it ever change? I don't know how it changes, but it seems like the younger generation is starting to figure out that is not the place to get my news and to get my information, which I would hope brings back communities, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we're missing in the social media world, is that sense of community and coming together like us old people and Gen X used to do.
I saw, this was so beautiful. I saw somebody on this Facebook, because I go and post all the videos on Facebook. I saw this person on Facebook put out this post that was essentially a photo of a tweet that Elon Musk theoretically put out. It's like, anybody who speaks poorly against President Trump's administration will instantaneously be banned. And they're like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe this guy's doing this. Is like, you literally, all you have is a black screen, and like you can copy and then just like write whatever. And it's so great because it's getting passed around, and then people started engaging with it. It was like, this is wild. Like, who are these people that are actually buying it?
Right.
And then I start going down wondering, like, is this like a plant? Like it's really just a group of 4 people, and they have 8 different accounts, and like then they buy all of those things. But again, like what I really appreciate is the leaders of Idaho being willing to come and speak with me, because if we can provide actual leadership, if we can actually connect people like you and people like, you know, Brad Ritchie or people like Dean Cameron, it's like, no, these are the people that are solving these problems. Like, the state government is not out to get you. These are the struggles that they're dealing with. These are the hurdles they're overcoming. These are the smart things that they're trying to do. And will they get it right every time? No, but like, at least we can understand what was going on there. And I think recognizing that people will have an alternate source, because if you want to know what's really going on, like, you don't go to the news anymore. You don't go to the Statesman. You don't go to radio. Like, we are communicating on social media, and it's just adding a healthier option, you know, and that's really the struggle. I think more people need to do that. And it's a heavy lift. Like, trust me, I know, but it's really the only way out.
And I think it's getting people to trust. I mean, if you look at, and you see it more than anybody, the distrust of government, you know, and I think about that as a government official. I don't have any incentive to lie, right? I have all incentive to tell the truth and just to communicate.
You're trying to line your pockets with taxpayer dollars. This is what they always say. I'm like, does he get a salary bonus? Like, if the levy goes through, like, I don't understand. I don't understand what the distrust of you is, right? Like, why would I lie to you about your house burning down? I'm not working for, you know, an insurance company or what, I don't know what you want.
Yeah. But I think some of it, if we go back to the mandate, like what drew this, what caused this, and it's not just Idaho problem, it's kind of a national problem.
Yeah.
Like, where does the distrust in government come from on either side? It doesn't matter which side. There's just an inherent distrust. And I think, you know, you can look back at when things became so political and so polarized, and when we got away from unity. And I think it's our job. I've always felt this. It's my job as a fire chief is to bring people together, right? And I don't care what your initials are after your name and party affiliations and all that. I am here to serve everybody. And that's my mission. I think that's the mission of fire chiefs around the state.
Chief Niemeyer, I really appreciate you. Thank you for coming in today.
Love it. Talking
about what we're doing with the Urban-Wildlands Interface. It is really important. And again, I got to be honest, after I talked to Dean Cameron, I was like scared to death. He's like, listen, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
And, you know, people need to know that. They need to know that. They need to understand that that's reality for whatever reason. I had a senator in here earlier. He's like, well, I'm not going to say the double C word. I was like, double C? What? He's like, climate change. Right. And he's like, listen, for whatever reason, everybody anticipates this getting worse. Yeah. And the more people understand that, and the more we arm them with things they can do, the better the state's going to be. So thank you for coming in today and explaining this.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right.